Councillors Bell and Knight. Are there any other apologies to report?
No further apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. The agenda's been circulated, those that have it. Are there any items that members would like to draw to attention as a declaration of interest? Thank you. 3 minutes of the previous meetings. So these are pages 5 to 14. One of them is a pink paper, but if you want to refer to that, we'll have to leave that till later. But otherwise, are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. So 4 is minutes of the Appointments Committee, pages 5 to 16. So those are offered for your support. Are there any alterations? Otherwise, shall I sign those? So, here we are at 5. So this is the budget and financial plan. You'll find these on pages 17 to 98. So following normal practice, colleagues, a proposed budget was submitted to the Director of Finance. It was marked the Labour Group budget, usual thing, and it was over 10 days ago, in line with the Constitution. No amendments have been received to that. So on that basis, the Director of Finance has produced the documentation which has been circulated and is now the proposed budget for 25-26, marked in the agenda as item 5 for members to consider. So, Mike, if you can take members through the budget.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the purpose of the report today is to present information to allow members to set a medium-term capital and revenue financial plan that allocates resources in line with the authority's strategic aims and ensures that the authority delivers an efficient and effective value for money service aligned with its budget principles. This will enable the authority to set a budget for 2025-26 while determining a precept level in line with statutory requirements. The budget and the financial plan report provides all the necessary financial information for members to approve a financial strategy that sets a balanced 2025-26 revenue budget based on a £5 precept increase. Section A and B of the report provide members with an executive summary and a background to the proposed 2025-26 to 2029-30 medium-term financial plan. Section C on pages 35 to 41 of the report considers the proposed 5-year capital programme and the associated potential borrowing requirement. The table on page 37 summarises the proposed £43.291 million capital programme, of which £39.701 million is being funded by potential borrowing. The programme has increased by £13.336 million, of which this is fully funded by borrowing. The programme now includes new schemes totalling £11.8 million, of which 8.7 relates to the additional year of the medium-term financial plan in 29-30. Inflation and additional growth within the capital programme has increased current scheme costs by £1.5 million. Paragraph 80 on pages 38 to 40 details the areas of planned capital spend, and the proposals include provisions for the asset plan investments outlined in other reports today. Section D on pages 42 to 43 considers how the minimum revenue provision, which is the sum that will be set aside each year to repay debt associated with capital borrowing, will be calculated. And the recommendation is to adopt a similar strategy to the current minimum revenue provision determination and use the asset life method for all unsupported borrowing. Provision for the minimum revenue provision and interest payments has been included in the updated medium-term financial plan. The authority is required to consider the impact of the proposed capital borrowing over a number of potential indicators, and Section E on pages 44 to 47 provides that information and explains the movement in the indicators over the medium-term financial plan period. In addition, a key indicator is that debt is only incurred to meet capital expenditure, and therefore net borrowing does not, except in the short term, exceed the total capital financing requirement. The level of borrowing in the proposed capital programme meets this requirement. The authority is required to prepare a treasury management strategy that sets a framework within the authority within which the authority will manage capital borrowing and manage investments, and Section F on pages 48 to 49 sets out the proposed strategy. The proposed authorised limit for gross borrowing of 66 million will ensure that the total gross debt does not exceed the capital financing requirement and that borrowing is only incurred to cover capital investment. The proposed investment strategy is consistent with the current strategy and recommends continuing with the institutional limits and minimum credit ratings outlined on page 52. The revenue costs associated with the level of prudential borrowing in the proposed 5-year capital programme have been built into the proposed medium-term financial plan and are deemed to be prudent, sustainable and affordable. And Section G on pages 60 to 70 of the report identifies the revenue assumptions supporting the plan. Paragraphs 118 to 125 on pages 61 to 66 outline the revised assumptions, the costs and the available funding and the impact these changes have on the proposed 25-26 budget and the updated medium-term financial plan. Some of the key assumptions, you will see that the authority intends to maintain the annual pay award assumption of 2.5% per annum in 25-26 and future years. As you'll be aware, CPI has risen in the previous month, but is expected to be around 2.75% around the middle of 2025. There's an increase in the 2025 precept by £5, which is just under 5.5% increase on the Band D, and maintains the future precept increase of 2% for future years. And you will see from the report that there has been a decrease in 2025 of government funding. We had an assumption that the government funding would increase by 2% in the medium-term financial plan, and the government funding went up by 1.7%. The table on page 29 summarises the impact of the changes to the current medium-term financial plan and the net forecast position in each year. The 25-26 financial position remains in a balanced position, subject to the key assumptions that we've made remaining consistent throughout the financial year. And due to the level of uncertainty over future years, forecasts particularly around pay and government funding, members are asked today to simply note any future financial challenges in the years 26 and 27 onwards at this point in time. Section H, pages 71 to 75, reviews the current general revenue and committed reserves position and the proposed use. And the table on page 75 outlines the anticipated reserve drawdown over the medium-term financial plan period. The authority is recommended to maintain a general fund reserve at the current level of 3.7 million, which equates to approximately 5% of the current net operating expenditure budget, and approve the committed reserves. Finally, Section I on pages 76 to 77 identifies that 38.391 million needs to be raised from council tax precept in 2025-26 to balance the revenue budget. That would require an increase in the current council tax Band D precept of £5 or just under 5.5%, increasing the Band D charge from £91.25 to £96.25. Although most people in the Merseyside area will pay Band A council tax of £64.17, which equates to an increase of just over 6 pence per week. Members are asked to approve the report recommendations on page 17 and 18. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you to you and all of your staff who've prepared, as again, outstanding our budget process, well received, and helping to put the authority on a firm accountancy footing. Do any members have any questions? Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Page 26, Mike, where it says the government funding service grant has been removed in its entirety. Is it safe to say that's gone never to be seen again? And it's just a case of waiting for the new revisions coming through on what the government's feel would be a better deal, is that right?
In terms of the services grant for fire authorities, it was removed completely, and also local authorities, and the funding for that was actually used towards what the government calls a recovery grant, which fire didn't receive any think from it was split against around local authorities. And yes, you're correct. It's now waiting to see what the funding review will actually bring in future years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Liberal Democrat groups are going to be supporting this budget, and certainly I want to put on record the thanks to Mike and his team and Phil in his last budget for all the fantastic work that's been done putting together a budget under very challenging circumstances. Just want to briefly touch on the wording of the budget resolution, if I may. I understand the reasoning for talking about cuts from 2010, but the reality is that Merseyside started losing significant numbers of firefighters in 2005, and downplaying that means the authority is not fully conveying the impact of the challenges we've faced over the past 20 years. I'm very disappointed in the way that the government's treated the authority this year. Usually we're sitting here talking about how the settlement hasn't gone up enough to cover inflation and other costs, but this year we're actually talking about an actual cash cut from central government and Merseyside taxpayers being forced to make up the difference. And if that wasn't bad enough, local taxpayers are footing the bill for the majority of that £1 million extra cost of the national insurance rise, contrary to the promises we've had from central government. My concern, Chair, is if we don't shout about this, if we don't kick up a fuss, we could be seen as an easy target next year for further cuts. So my question really is, what is being done to mobilise Merseyside MPs, council leaders and anyone else we can send down to London to actually make clear that Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service has been cut enough by successive governments and it has to stop?
Chair, I'll happily respond to that.
I'll respond as well in a moment.
Sure. So provide council making some with the assurance that we've been in dialogue both with Treasury and a number of key ministers, including the Deputy Prime Minister, in relation to our concerns over what was the forthcoming budget and the comprehensive spending review, and ensuring that the Fire and Rescue Service wasn't detrimented by any of the changes of grant. However, you have identified the points that Mike has made in his budget presentation in relation to grant received from central government and the costs being to a greater or lesser degree picked up by council tax increases. And we did lobby as the authority for council tax flexibility, which allowed us to increase the council tax by up to £5. That was, that was fortunate in some degree, because it allows us to ensure that we are protecting the services that we provide to the communities of Merseyside, but it is through the combination of government grant and that the shortfall in government grant being offset by council tax. It was also impacted on by national insurance changes as well, and costs being picked up by the authority too. That said, in relation to the budget itself, Mike and the team have been able to balance the budget accordingly without any detrimental impact on the services that we provide to the public, which is testimony to the hard work, the innovation and the creativity. I do come back to the references to 2005 and I suppose to some degree making the budget setting process legitimate around timescales of how far we do go back to reflect the challenges that we've faced. But we do recognise that, and we do recognise that the Fire and Rescue Services had a significant period of austerity, and in some way we have dealt with that really effectively. We have reinvested back into the Fire and Rescue Service and resources that were lost over the course of the last 7 years, for sure. But I would also recognise that actually the challenges that Merseyside face are faced by other Fire and Rescue Services the length and breadth of the country. And those points have been made loud and clear in a CSR submission that is being put through to Home Office, which will funnily enough be passported onto MHCLG now, given changes to the machinery of government, all of which will have an implication, no doubt, on future funding of the Fire and Rescue Service. But we've been made it clear around the fact that we are seeking reinvestment into the Fire and Rescue Service. We are seeking investment into areas of central provision which were arguably stripped out during periods of austerity in the past. So, you've seen government make references to a College of Fire, which allows us to create standards, guidance and products which were utilised nationally. That again is part and parcel of that CSR submission, as well as the fact that, and it's been evidenced many times by members of this authority, that as Fire and Rescue Services, as it currently stands under the Home Office, we weren't afforded the opportunity to receive capital funding, and as a result of that, we've had to put aside revenue funding and gather that over a period of time, or borrow to invest in our building stock, our fire stations and our premises. And we've done that really effectively. But the fact of the matter is, we would still benefit from capital investment back into the Fire and Rescue Service, and that is equally part and parcel of that CSR submission and request into government. And as I say, that will be considered in the forthcoming CSR, and we are hopeful that the kind of the messages and the clarity of position that we are adopting now from a national perspective as well as a local perspective will ensure that there is investment back into the Fire and Rescue Service to offset some of the impacts of long periods of austerity, and we will self-evidently receive a better outcome next time.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, it seems to me that what we've got before us today is both a legal and a strong budget, and we shouldn't underestimate the fact that we are in a position to be able to deliver both of those aspects, if you like. I'm assuming that from now on that we'll be lobbying the Minister, who I believe is Alex Norris now, for a better deal from the multi-year settlement from next year onwards. So I think we should agree the budget today, but recognise it's not everything we wanted, but we do have the opportunity to have dialogue with the government going forward into the future. So overall, I think it's fair to say that with this budget, the Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service is in a good place, and the impression I get is certainly we're in a much better place than perhaps many other fire and rescue services up and down the country. So having said that, Chair, I think we do need to place on record our thanks to Mike and all his staff for all the hard work they've done in being able to deliver the budget that we've got before us today, and I'd hope that we can give unanimous approval to it. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. I mean, if you were going to say, well, 20 years, let's look at some of the statistics. Actually, not quite 20 years, but certainly before the period of austerity, our budget would be just over 80 million. It's trickling up to 77 now. And so we've not recovered from those years of austerity. And that's been the change for this authority. Similarly, I haven't got the statistics to mind, but you can imagine, before austerity, we've got 642 firefighters on establishment now. It would have been a lot more than that. 32 going up to 34 fire engines would have been 45, whatever it is, before. But then the corollary to that is the number of fire incidents we attend arguably could be lower. The survivability of those incidents and of car crashes and everything else that we attend is much improved. There are some fights, there's some battles that are worth a fight. In this one, it's that we are told that we're going to battle the budget this year and then we're going to move on to a multi-year settlement for future years. That's where we need to put our lobbying effort in. To that end, Phil, our chief, his team, and Kieran Timmins, who used to be one of our director of finance here, have produced some documents which I've seen, which are part of the early stage lobbying process for the new ministers to try and lobby for a better deal. This is for the fire sector. We'll be going in separately as Merseyside, and we're going in on the back of our impeccable record, our outstanding status. And my goodness, if there was an authority we're bound to say that deserved special attention are being looked at. We provide the service level and the coordination for whichever department it is that's running us. We've produced lots of lobbying documents recently. We wrote to Angela Rayner. We've written to the Treasury in the past few weeks, lobbying for a correction, we would say, of the way that the budget works for us. I think that in terms of governmental change or machinery of government changes, the ask on devolution and a variety of other reasons, we do need to step up our lobbying. We'll be starting that, we'll get a chance to address questions to Alex Norris in a couple of weeks' time. The new department takes over from the 1st of April, and we'll be straight onto the back of that, lobbying for capital, lobbying for the new homes bonus, and a variety of other things that will assist us to provide better facilities for the people of Merseyside. I think, yes, there's been some changes in the amount of grant that we've got, but for 2 years, previous 2 years, we'd asked the government to give us the flexibility for £5 on Band D. And the last 2 years, they wouldn't allow that. This year, the government have allowed us to have that flexibility. And that's enabled us to come up with the balanced budget that we have here, and also prepare ourselves for the pay round, the settlement round, and then moving us on into, I think the biggest challenge will be getting a good deal in year one of a multi-year deal. And that's what we will definitely be lobbying for on behalf of Merseyside. So, if there are any other questions, yes?
It's not really a question, it's just a comment really. I'd like to give my thanks to the authority for not affecting those on Band A to C. I think those with the broader shoulders should foot that extra. So yeah, I'd just like to thank the authority for protecting those poorest and most vulnerable in society as well.
Thank you. So, I'm just going to read through the recommendations if there's no more points. Recommendations are printed, but I'll just read through them for the clarity. A is to approve the Director of Finance and Procurement's recommendation on maintaining the current general fund balance, 3.7 million, maintaining the reserves outlined in paragraph 148 to 158. Approve the 25-26 Merseyside Fire and Rescue budget. C, approve the Director of Finance and Procurement's recommendation on maintaining the current general fund balance, 3.7 million. Approve the proposal to increase the precept by £5 for Band D properties 25-26. It is scaled. It gives the figures 91.25 to 96.25, increases of 2% in the years after that. Notes the assumption in developing a 5-year financial plan with a budget estimate of 77.934 million. Approve the capital programme, which is summarised in Appendix B. Approve the 25-26 to 29-30 updated medium-term financial plan, Appendix C. Approve the discretionary fees and charges as Appendix E. Approve the minimum revenue provision for 25-26, paragraphs 87 to 96. Note the prudential indicators, also 97 to 106. Approve the Treasury Management Strategy outlined in Section F. There is a list. And note that the recommendations above provide an approved framework within which officers undertake the day-to-day capital and treasury management activities. Is that agreed? Agreed. Is that unanimous? Are there any anyone who's abstaining or voting against? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. And as we have said, as always, big task, putting the budget together. But I know that the auditors, we've got a new team of auditors. The auditors, when they come round, always, say how well our budget is performing and put forward. So if we move on, colleagues, 6, asset management plan, which is page 99 to 178.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, directly relates to the budget as much as anything else, and members will recall there has come together. The budget will be presented, and then the asset management plans that underpin the budgetary planning process would follow. So the purpose of this report is to set out how Merseyside Fire and Rescue Authority, the authority plans to align its physical assets and systems with its corporate aims and objectives over the next 5 years, so 2025 to 2030. The asset management plans take into account the financial environment and the challenges that the authority faces whilst delivering our aspirations for the future, and those aspirations contained within the community risk management plan particularly. The plans underpin the changes that are detailed within the authority's current community risk management plan, service delivery plan, people plan and medium-term financial plan, thereby meeting the expectations of both internal and external users. And the recommendation itself is it's recommended that members approve the asset management plans provided in the appendices of this report, and those asset management plans being specifically plans related to building, land and contents, data technology, so ICT provision, both kind of the infrastructure that supports ICT, but also importantly the applications that assist the fire and rescue service and the authority delivering its ambition around its people, and then the transport and fleet asset management plans all contained within the documentation within the appendices themselves. So I'll probably pause at that point, and I don't intend to go through the asset management plans themselves forensically, but I'm happy to take any questions on any element of them as part and parcel of the scrutiny of the authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the Chief on that or other officers? Can we agree the recommendations that are set out there? Thank you. So the next is revision of contract standing orders. These you'll find on pages 179 to 406.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of today's report is to update members on the proposed changes to the Constitution following the amendments to the contract standing orders. The contract standing orders, as contained in Appendix A, have been amended to reflect the changes in legislation following the enactment of the Procurement Act 2023. The reason for the implementation of the new legislation is following the UK's exit from Europe and the opportunity and intention to streamline processes. The report highlights some of the changes the legislation has introduced, including greater transparency of public procurement through an increase in publishing of notices from the outset of a procurement process through the life cycle of the contract. This also complements the additional measures for addressing any conflicts of interest in terms of transparency and reviewing as contained in paragraph 15. The Act has also introduced its objectives, which the authority should have regard to, as detailed in paragraph 8. These are to deliver value for money, maximise public benefit, share information for the purpose of allowing suppliers to understand the authority's procurement policies and decisions, and act and be seen to act with integrity. These objectives are ones which the authority have already been undertaking in any regard. There is a change in terms of the thresholds. These are detailed in the report, as you can see in the tables, and they are on page 182 and 183 of the report. There will be a transition period, which is also reflected in the contract standing orders, between procurement activities that have commenced prior to the enactment of the Act on the 24th of February and any procurement activities to be undertaken thereafter. Following the enactment of this new legislation and subject to members' approval today, the changes to the contract standing orders will be disseminated to all staff in order to allow them to comply with their procurement activities, and the procurement team have undertaken their training in order to assist the employees across the service. So the recommendations are for members to note the enactment of the new legislation, the Procurement Act 2023, that's come into force, and approve the amendments to the Constitution incorporating the proposed contract standing orders in Appendix A. I'm happy to take any questions, and I've also got the Head of Procurement with us for any specifics in respect of his department.
Thank Thank you. Thank you very much. So, colleagues, if there are any questions on those details, I'm sure you've read every single page. Otherwise, the recommendations are set out there on page 179. Are they agreed? Thank you very much. Well, as I said before, this is the item on the agenda that we're all here for. Procurement of a non-domestic water, wastewater and ancillary service contract. Pages 407 to 410. Chief?
Thanks, Chair. It's my privilege to bring this report to members,
that's it.
given the nature and its title. In seriousness, the purpose of the report is to inform members of the outcome of the procurement process to secure non-domestic water, wastewater and ancillary services for the service undertaken via the Crown Commercial Services Framework Agreement for wastewater and ancillary services, and to seek approval from the members to award the contract to Water Plus Limited on the basis of the outcome of the procurement exercise. And the specific recommendations is to note the contents of the report and approve the award as suggested to Water Plus Limited for the duration of 3 years with an estimated value of £690,000, having an option to extend by a further 1 year. And the reason why we would bring this paper to the authority is given the size and scale of the procurement exercise. I'm happy to take any questions really in relation to the report, Chair. But members will be clear that this is we need to be able to source water and wastewater arrangements for the authority, and the utilisation of Crown Commercial Services Framework is the most effective way of delivering that on behalf of the authority. So again, Chair, happy to take any questions on the report itself.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Otherwise, the recommendations are set out on page 470. Are they agreed? Thank you. Now, the next is to move to close the meeting as we're going to discuss some exempt items. Yeah, just for a few moments, if that's all right. I need to turn off the